Good morning, or day, or whatever it is during your time frame. This is Sand Rammer back at the ye old foundry office. Now this video was going to be in response to Tubalcain's request for information on how to properly gate his upcoming casting that he's going to be making. He wanted to, there was a few questions in his mind as to, the most effective way to feed his casting. Now, I was going to make this, pardon me, and just send it via an attachment to an email to Tubalcain, and I don't know. I myself don't accept things with attachments. Nowadays, it's very, very dangerous to accept an attachment and open it because it could be a virus or something very bad. So I think this is probably going to be the best way to give him the advice that he's requesting. Now, what he's trying to make is he's trying to make a vise, okay, one of those little machinist vices, and he's going to be making out of aluminum. He didn't mention any other metal, so we're going to work under the assumption that it's going to be made out of aluminum, okay? But I don't think the gating and the risering would have been any different if he'd made it out of brass and bronze, okay? Or iron, for that matter, okay? It would have been fairly close to the same process. Now, Mr. Pete is Tom. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, just in case you didn't know. Well, given the fact you asked me where I lived, that you didn't know. So now I'm telling you. Okay, Jacksonville, Florida. Okay, now your casting is, as simple as a casting as I could possibly get. It's basically a big chunk of metal with some curvatures built in, but it's essentially a big chunk of metal. Note number one, I'm hoping you have a pyrometer, immersion pyrometer, or some type of, even a optical pyrometer, which sometimes with the aluminum it's not as accurate, but I hope you have a pyrometer, okay, because the pouring range for aluminum is 1250 to 1400, okay. The thicker the item, the closer to the cool end of that range you have to go to. This item that you're looking at, no more than 1300 degrees, okay? No more than 1300 degrees, because it's pretty thick. It's pretty bulky. So please remember that when you're getting ready to pour it. If you don't have a pyrometer and you're doing it by eye, as soon as your metal is molten and you stir it and it seems fluid, pour it then. You don't want to get it any hotter, okay? And so that's that on that portion. Okay, now how do you want to gate and how do you want to riser it? Okay, I've made a little bit of a drawing back here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and I'm going to be pointing out a few things. I hope my usual problem with these lights doesn't mess up none, but we'll get close enough, and I'm hoping that this will work. Alright, so we're working under the assumption you're going to use your two-part, the ones with the loose pieces, your pattern with the loose pieces. This is the way I see it rammed up in the mold, with your loose pieces in the cope, your larger piece in the drag. Okay, now, and this is a diagram just showing it by itself without the runners and gates or anything. Okay, now I look at it from the top. This is how I see that it's going to be fed. You put a riser on the ends, okay, and that's in the cope. In the cope, the risers would be here and here, and then the runners, and well, the runners, basically you're just going to be making runners and a splash basin down here, because you don't have to have an in-gate for in the drag. Your in gate is going to be your riser, the opening of the riser. Now, let's say you've made your riser. You know, you've punched your riser. I think your big, what looked like a huge sprue. I can't remember if that was tapered or not. If it is tapered, you gotta punch through the top, you know, outside the top, like from here, so that when you pull it out, it's easy. And the amount of metal would be, you know, it'd be set up the right way for feeding properly into your casting. If it's straight, no big deal. You can punch it whichever way. You can punch it from the bottom, or you can punch it from the top. Anyway, here. And this is the rest of the casting with the brake line, and indicating that this is only a portion. Okay, you're going to feed this, right? Because this is the thickest portion. Now, as soon as you punch this hole, and you don't take this out yet. Okay, let's say you know your two pieces in here. When it comes time to make your risers, when you take this apart, just turn it over. You rest it on this on a molding board, and then you're going to be working with this face. Okay, so then we're looking at the underside. Let's say there's the two pins. Okay, let's say you're looking at the two pins. Okay, you cut the riser. As soon as you pull that out, you take your hand tool and you get rid of this excess sand from the edge into here. Okay, so that what you're going to have is you're going to have an opening into the casting like that. You don't have to worry about a basin for here. Okay, that's not going to help anything. It's not going to do anything for this system, because what you're going to have in the drag, you're going to have this bringing the metal to the ends where the opening's going to be like this. That's going to feed straight down this straight line here, as opposed to pushing it this way and having to, you know, you'd have to have part of it go this way, part of that way. If you have this going into that, it's going to easily flow all the way to the center. This is going to flow all the way to the center. It'll match up. It'll come together as a solid mass, and then it'll feed from the bottom up. Okay. Anyway, so you've cut the riser on each end. You've taken away the excess. Well, this isn't even going to be here, because that's going to be like that. Take away the excess sand, and don't forget to dust that area and you know, brush it nice and smooth. You don't want any of this excess sand particles to be pushed into your mold cavity. Okay, so now you've got your cope. Your cope has the risers. Right, you've done that. Now you're going to, in the cope area, you're going to punch your sprue. And I think I do remember that that was tapered. And you're also going to make your pouring basin so that you have a large area to hit right here, and you don't hit it straight down. Okay, you're trying to minimize the amount of turbulence going down here so that you don't manufacture any dross. That's particularly important when you're using brass and bronze, because copper will absorb hydrogen from the atmosphere readily. Okay, readily. So, but aluminum and cast iron, not so much. but you're still going to get it. If you have an overly large amount of turbulence in here, it's still going to combine with the atmosphere, aluminum in this case, and you're going to have a little bit of froth that's going to be stuck in your pore. Okay, so a good cross section here. You need a pouring basin so that you can hit the side of the pouring basin, not straight down. Okay, turbulence here. You hit this, it adheres to the sidewall, and it flows down more evenly, or less with less turbulence. Okay. Now down here you're going to have a splash basin for the same reason as you have a pouring basin. The splash basin down here, a side view, should be like this. Okay, it's going to come down, it's going to hit this and fill this up, and then it's going to go to the sides. Okay, let's get that out of the way. That's just totally ugly. In the case of this casting, you put your down sprue and your splash basin just about in the middle, equally distant from your two risers here. You're just going to cut it like you see here. Give yourself a little bit of end here, because if you have any sand in this, it'll be pushed to the end and held there by hydraulic pressure, and then the metal going, filling that up and going into your mold cavity is going to be clean of sand, hopefully. Okay, the only things I saw of your castings that had any defects, it looked like sand was in it. The sand had been pushed against the wall of the casting, and that's not so bad when it comes to a industrial thing. I mean, it would be bad if it was like a pressure vessel, like a pump body or a valve body. But for what you're talking about, it really has no effect on the the physical strength of the item. But if you want to make it look as good as possible, just get all the sand out of that mold cavity and get all the sand out of the stuff you cut, and it'll look much better. Now, you did mention that you didn't like the 3D printing because of the rough shape on the outside, the rough shape on the inside. That's easily taken care of because the material that you're using to do the 3D printing is made out of plastic. Just take it and spray paint it. Okay, you can add a couple of coats if need be, but I think with one coat, when you see what happens, is that most of those rough surfaces are filled in by the paint. The paint dries and hardens, and now you have more of a smooth surface that the sand can adhere to and can emulate. Okay, now, all right, let me go over this again. You've cut your sprue, you've made your pouring basin, you've cut your risers, and you've connected your risers to you've made your opening. Let's do it this way. You've made your openings so that when the runners, when they get filled up and the back pressure is established, and then it'll start feeding into here, go down here, both sides at the same time. These will fill up from the bottom up, and then it'll start solidifying. Now, what's the sequence of solidification? Well, the sequence will be from, let's turn that around, from the bottom upwardly, and from the center that way. Okay? Because, well, number one, if you are insisting on having this void in here, it'll be the thin wall, the walls will be thinner anyway, not a big block. Okay? But even if you were to leave that green sand core, or the core out of there. If this was just a solid block, the solidification process would be the exact same thing. Okay, that's going to fill up. This is going to be the coldest because it hit fastest, or rather the first, it hit first, and so solidification starts here first. Once it fills up, this is all cold too, so solidification will start here fastest. What you have in here is you have a zone of hot metal. Okay, so that's going to be hot, this is going to be cold, so it all solidifies here. Now if you were to look, let's see if I can make a diagram. You didn't need to be like that. I'm looking at the middle of this. When that starts solidifying in here, what you'll wind up having is solid metal like that. This will be solidifying, this will be solidifying, and when these and this will be the coldest right in here, where there's all nothing but cold sand all around it. And this, don't forget, I'm looking at a side view here. Top view, this is going to be cold here, this is going to be cold here. So all the way around 360 degrees, that's going to be making that solidify quickly. So you'll have this side meeting this side from not only the side view and the top view. So you're going to have, this is going to be solid, and then it'll be filling in, and that's a matter of seconds, really. You know, it'll solidify, and everything, all those, it'll all be solid here, it'll all be solid here, and start solidifying up here. And here's the big thing, is that where you've got the as I recall in your casting, this is your basically your thickest area, where you have the riser attached to your casting, and you've got it where you're going to be feeding this area. The risers have to be fed last. Okay, that's where the hottest metal has got to be. You want this to be cold, coming outwardly towards the ends where the risers are going to be waiting, and so this metal has to be the hottest. That's got to be the hottest. Now you're going to be able to see when that metal, after that metal feeds up down here, that it starts backing up. Okay, I don't know why that happened. Suddenly everything went black. You know, you got plenty of battery, you got plenty of room on the card. In the middle of my explanation on how this is being fed over here, the riser is being fed, it went and died on me. Okay, thankfully I remember pretty much what all I was about to explain. Okay, so we'll get back to it. As I was about to say, once this all gets fed up and it's starting to feed the stuff in the cope, let's get you back here, feeding in the cope, this will start feeding or backing up evenly. This will start backing up at the same time because you're feeding it evenly from this point. As soon as you see it starting to come up, the risers, stop pouring it here and go over here and top these off. Fill these up as fast as possible. Okay? That way you'll ensure that the risers have the hottest metal in them. This is cold metal, hot metal. Things are solidifying, things are solidifying, things are starting to solidify upwardly, and then this will be able to feed that last little bit that solidifies last. Okay? Now the next thing I was going to cover was this void that you want in here. Now if you insist on not making this a solid piece and making a void in here being formed by the molding technique, you're going to have to make a green sand core or a regular core for that. Now I noticed that you know, on your video you showed how you had a brand new pattern that was a split pattern, and that they put extra you know, gap in here, or not gap, but extra angle in here so that this green sand core could come out. go ahead and try that first. Okay, ram it up and try it. See if that comes out. If it does come out, you're set. You're good. Okay, this'll all be all solid sand in here, and this will be part of the, like the tip of the iceberg for the solid sand, and this metal, when you pour it, will all form around that, and you'll have a nice void on the inside. If you have too much trouble with that for some reason, they didn't give you enough draft or whatever, you can make your own core. Now, I don't know what kind of material you use for making cores. You could be using the CO2 sand, you know, the stuff that you use with water glass, or you could use a regular, you know, core material that you might have around there. For instance, the old-fashioned core material I was using, and it worked real well, was the molasses water type of core sand. Okay. Now the thing is, if you're gonna make a core, you can't just make the core just in here and just have this sit on the drag, because once you pour the metal, this core, if it's not anchored, is going to be pushed by the hydrostatic pressure of this molten metal, and this won't be where you want it anymore. So what you do is, if you're going to make your own core, it's going to have to be the portion that you're trying to form and a seat that it's going to sit in. What it's going to, what you do is, like this is you're looking straight down at the at this portion of your pattern. You got this hole here. You get yourself a little bit of sheet metal, bend yourself a little wall around it, give yourself 3/8, a ½ inch of room here, and it doesn't have to be like screwed into the material or anything. You just tape it in place, and like with duct tape, that's pretty strong stuff. Then you ram your core material in here. The top of the sheet metal can be where you strike it off, where you form this facing. You take you get the core out, you bake it, or you gas it, depending on if you're using CO2 gas or not. And then once that's hard, at least hard enough for you to be able to use, or rather manipulate with your fingers, you put it back into this pattern. Then you ram, this is the drag, you ram this up in the drag hole. Okay, this will be in place. The sand will grip the sides of this and hold it in place. Then you can pull this out, and then you'll have this being held by the sand, and this forming your void in there. Okay, and I hope this didn't mess up on me again. It appears to be running low on power though, so I better quit now. Anyway, have a good project. I hope everything works out good for you, Lyle. In other words, for you who are confused now, who I'm talking about now, Tubalcain, also known as Mr. Pete, what was it, 222, I think. He's Lyle Peterson. Okay, that's his real name. So I hope that wasn't a state secret. You didn't? I don't think so. I'm not going to tell him where you live. How about that? I'll keep that a secret. Anyway, for those of you who are watching this was a teaching project in a way for everybody out there, including Mr. Pete. And I hope this project works out for him. If you do what I asked or I advised, I think it'll come out really good for you. Okay, and this is the end of this, and we will see you later. All right, kisses and all that good stuff for everybody out there. Bye bye.